Good morning. Welcome to St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, Wichita, Wednesday Chat. I'd like to thank Bishop Mike Milliken and the staff of St. Stephen's and all of you for allowing me to do these chats and take the services until there is a new rector. I regret that I didn't have time to get to know all of you before the pandemic hit. I was looking forward to our first and fifth Sundays together and coffee hour and singing and all of the activities that are church related, but nature took its course and we've not been able to do that. When I was in seminary, my field ed mentor, Father Wayne Carlson, taught me a lot, and one thing he taught me is that there are only about 4 or 5 Episcopal priests in the world, and the rest is done with smoke and mirrors. He was being funny, of course. It's not magic, but it is a bit of a mystery how Episcopalians tend to find each other and gather and know people from around the country and around the world that know somebody else, etc. That's the way with Bishop Mike and me. I was ordained in the Diocese of Western Kansas when we lived in Hayes, and Bishop Mike, who was then Father Mike, was head of the standing committee that allowed me to be ordained, and I am grateful to him and that standing committee and Bishop Jim Adams for that opportunity. When I was thinking about what to chat about today, I remembered that I like telling people about saintly Episcopalians whom we recognize in lesser feasts and fasts and holy women, holy men. And as this month is Black History Month, I wanted to tell you about Absalom Jones, whose day we celebrate on February the 13th. Absalom Jones was the first Black Episcopal priest, and it came about in this way. He was born as a slave in 1746 in Delaware to Abraham Wynkoop, who was a wealthy Anglican planter. Absalom was working in the fields when Wynkoop recognized that he was intelligent and ordered that he be trained to work in the house. Absalom eagerly accepted instruction in reading, and he used pennies that people would give him from time to time to buy a primer and a Bible. Abraham Wynkoop died, and Benjamin Wynkoop, his son, inherited the plantation, but then he sold it along with Absalom's mother, his 5 brothers, and a sister. Think of that for a moment. He took Absalom with him to Philadelphia, where he opened a store, and Absalom, still a slave, worked for him in the store. When Absalom was 20, he and Mary Thomas received permission from their owners to be married, and the marriage was performed at Christ Church in Philadelphia. Absalom and his father-in-law used their savings and sought donations and loans from prominent Quakers in order to purchase Mary's freedom. They did that, and then Mary and Absalom worked very hard to get money to repay the loans, and they were also able to buy some property. They also had enough money for Absalom to buy his own freedom. However, Benjamin Wynkoop repeatedly refused to allow him to purchase his freedom, but in 1784 he granted him a manumission. I had to look that word up, which meant that he gave him his freedom. Absalom continued to work in the store as a paid employee of his former owner. He had been attending St. Peter's Episcopal Church but he left that and began worshiping at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church. He met Richard Allen, who had been engaged to preach at St. George's, and the two became lifelong friends. Together they founded the Free African Society, and they were both lay ministers for the black membership of St. George's. However, their active evangelism attracted so many black members that the white members of St. George's were confounded, and I guess you could say upset. So, the black members worked hard to raise money to build an upstairs gallery intended to enlarge the church, but then the black members were forced to sit in the gallery and not with the other members of the church. One day a dispute arose and most of the black members walked indignantly out of St. George's as a body. Prior to that incident, the Free African Society had initiated religious services, some of which were presided over by the Reverend Joseph Pilbore, who was an assistant at St. Paul's Episcopal Church. The society began to build the African Church of Philadelphia, which later became the African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas, which is still in existence today. The church membership took a vote and decided to affiliate with the Episcopal Church. Richard Allen decided to remain with the Methodist Church, and it was he who founded the AME, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But he and Absalom Jones remained lifelong friends and were very active in Philadelphia. The African Church was dedicated in 1794, and soon after that they applied for membership in the Episcopal Diocese of Pennsylvania on the conditions that they be received as an organized body, that they have control over their own local affairs, and that Absalom Jones be licensed as a lay reader and, if qualified, be ordained as a minister. The church was incorporated under the laws of the Commonwealth of Philadelphia in 1796, that is, of Pennsylvania, and Bishop William White ordained Jones as a deacon in 1795 and as a priest in 1802. The information says that Jones was an earnest preacher. He denounced slavery and warned the oppressors to clean their hands of slaves. To him, God was the Father who always acted on behalf of the oppressed and distressed. But it was his constant visiting and his mild manner that made him beloved by his congregation and by the community. St. Thomas Church grew to over 500 members during its first year. The congregants formed a day school and were active in moral uplift, self-improvement, and anti-slavery activities. Absalom Jones was sometimes known as the Black Bishop of the Episcopal Church, although he was not a bishop. He was an example of persistent faith in God and the church as God's instrument, and he died on February 13th in 1818. In some of the manuscripts of that time, there is a small personal reminiscence by Absalom Jones. He says, "I, Absalom Jones, was born in Sussex, Delaware, on the 6th of November, 1746. I was small when my master took me to the field to wait and attend on him in the house, and being very fond of learning, I was careful to save the pennies that were given to me by the ladies and gentlemen from time to time. I bought myself a primer and begged to be taught by anybody that I found able and willing to give me the least instruction. Soon after this, I was able to buy a spelling book, for as my money increased, I supplied myself with books, among others, a Testament. Fondness for books gave me little or no time for the amusements that took up the leisure hours of my companions. By this course I became singular and escaped many evils, and also saved my money." He then talks about being his mother and siblings being sold and going to Philadelphia. He says, in the year 1766, I asked my master the liberty of going 1 quarter to night school, which he granted. I had a great desire to learn arithmetic. In that quarter I learned addition, troy weight, subtraction, apothecary's weight, practical multiplication, practical division, and reduction. I'm sure that some of you who are and have been teachers know what all of those are, and you can instruct me by email if you like. He talks about having been married and having been freed by his master. He says, since my freedom I have bought a couple of small houses on the small lot, which now let for £22 a year. He was not only a man of faith and deep conviction, but an entrepreneur. And today we can thank God for people such as Absalom Jones, who have been faithful and persevered in that faith. Thank you, Lord, for this man. I hope all of you are staying safe and warm and dry in this weather, and that all of you have enough groceries to prevent you from having to travel to shop. Let us hope it warms up in the next week or so. I will see you again in 2 weeks. Next week is Ash Wednesday, and there will be no chat that day. However, there will be recorded services on the next Sundays in February.